Joining us to discuss social responsible investments is Mark van Wyk. He's portfolio manager for the Mergence High Impact Debt Fund. Thanks so much for your time, Mark, and again, thanks for your patience in our Cape Town studio. We've got two elements that make up the Mergence Social Responsible Investment Fund, and I'd like to touch on the first element of that, which is your low carbon equity fund. This is an innovative product, I would say. Kevin, don't you think?
Very innovative, yeah.
Mark, just take us through the rationale behind the Mergence Low Carbon Equity Fund.
Yes, Bronwyn, thanks, Kevin. The purpose of the fund was basically to set up a equity fund where we can actually track the SWICs, but at the same time promote capital mobilizations into companies that have strategies in place to lower their carbon emissions and also disclose their carbon emissions.
Mark, if you look at the companies that you can put into the portfolio, are South African companies providing you with enough information in terms of the carbon emission to make a decision on whether this type of company qualifies for the portfolio? In other words, are listed companies advanced enough in South Africa to meet the types of requirements that you would ideally want to look at to evaluate them?
Yes, that's a good question, Kevin. The UNPRI Carbon Disclosure Program, which is also part of the JSE SRI Fund's disclosure programs, basically facilitates and encourage companies, listed companies, to disclose their carbon emissions. And there are quite a number of companies on the JSE that has done that, but there's also others that actually don't.
Which ones in particular
and that basically gives us...
Which ones in particular fall into your portfolio because they meet the criteria? Mark, perhaps just throw some names around here.
Like, for example, a Pick n Pay is quite aggressive on the sustainability, whereas maybe some other retailers are potentially not. As you can see in our fund fact sheet, we potentially underweight on some other retailers as a component of the SWICs, but some of the other retailers and also some of the larger manufacturing companies like Cap International, etc., are quite progressive in disclosure.
Mark, is there a minimum requirement in terms of carbon emissions that you would look at before you consider a company? Or is it a question that a company is making progress in reducing its carbon emission that then captures your attention?
I think it's probably the latter, where the company has brought it onto their agenda to say, let's look at this carbon emissions issues currently, and let's put a plan in place to reduce it. We understand that there's certain companies that's on the JSE that's listed, and also part of the SWICs, that will not enable us to exclude them completely. There's certain industry that is very high carbon emitters, and if we exclude them, we will be running too big a tracking error on the fund as a whole. So we have to include some that do disclose and also are big emitters. However, we actually are proponents for those that actually do disclose.
I want to touch now on the other element within the SRI fund, and that is of course the Mergence High Impact Debt Fund. And maybe just for viewers to give them an indication here, I mean, this is a fund that invests in projects, businesses, organizations and funds that encourage and enhance growth and development in South Africa. So that's pretty much your objective. Is it easy to find many projects along these lines?
In short, not really. We have to dig quite deep and quite hard, looking for these sustainable, beneficial businesses that address the target areas that we specifically looking at as fund managers. We're mainly guided by the social attitude survey of the HSRC and the National Planning Development Plan of national government to give us guidance and directions as to what are the issues currently topical for our fund members and for South Africans as a whole that we can use their money to address.
Mark, if I look at the components of that aspect, there's quite a lot of exposure to, or indirect exposure, I guess, to the housing market. Why in particular housing? What is I mean, other than obviously we have a shortage of housing in South Africa, is it a viable investment?
Well, the fund is a debt investment, and therefore we need to protect and preserve capital. There are quite a number of sustainable, well-capitalized, well-managed social housing businesses out there that basically supply rental stock into the housing space. And there's also businesses that is involved in the development of new stock for ownership space. And housing does appear to be one of those high topical emotional issues that South Africans are faced with on a day-to-day basis.
What can we expect, just as a final question, from a performance perspective when it comes to the Mergence SRI fund?
From a performance perspective, our benchmark is CPI plus 3. We've got a strong pipeline of underlying projects that we're currently evaluating for that benchmark and potentially overshooting it to hopefully achieve a fund performance of about CPI plus 4.5% and going forward.